we have a wonderful guest who's our other host of ASSAP Seriously Strange, and that's the wonderful Kristian Lander. But I will come back to Chris in a minute and give him his bio. So as for ASSAP news, Chris, what do we have at the moment?
So I guess the ASSAP news presently is that we are rolling out some new membership options that are going to be unveiled going into the new year. We had a membership meeting yesterday because ultimately the ASSAP's membership at £20 has not ever increased in 17 years, despite the fact that we as the other side are absorbing some of those costs. So our membership basically is undergoing some evaluation about what that will look like going into 2026, 2027. Some more publications that are coming forward. So the idea of going to add more magazines to our yearly calendar, as well as some more events that are going to be added to our yearly calendar. And for those members, having access to those events happening, my goal is to have an events happening in the four corners of the country. One up north, one south, one left, one right of the country. So ASSAP are reaching out to our members because, of course, we appreciate that potentially, one trip can be quite a long way. So we want to bring a meeting much closer to you. And you as our members can actually help us with this. Maybe you can help facilitate some of those options that we have going forward. So that's what's on the ASSAP agenda right now, is to rolling out what will be going forward over the next couple of years or so. And also, we would like to have another ASSAP podcast. So I would like the opportunity to bring someone from our membership, perhaps someone who's here tonight, is to come under our wing perhaps and help assist with our Seriously Strange here, but also is to have another podcast show focused really on the content, perhaps what's in the paranormal news of the week, of the month, and also to recap some of our webinars that we do on a monthly basis, perhaps have a kind of look back at the month of what was the 4 webinars that we have produced. I'd really like to help, have another presenter come on board from our amazing membership, because we do have such a varied amount of talent within our membership pool. It'd be great to pull on them, or people who want to step up and get behind a mic for the first time, those who would like to write for the first time. Seriously Strange magazine, the website, the journal, of course, are amazing options for those who want to step in and actually get something published, get something checked out by our amazing membership that consists really of serious researchers as well as enthusiasts and academics, and as well as the lay, the casual. But we appeal really to a much more interested topic, those who are already familiar with the topics. And of course, so if you are willing to engage in those, perhaps you want to write something, perhaps you want to present, or you want to talk, we would be happy to have you come on board and communicate with us. So that is really our message to you is, hey, we are members. We, the committee, are members of ASSAP. We just choose to wear a few more hats. And actually, we'd love to have more of you wear more hats too. So that's really what we're talking about.
Sorry if I'm a bit distracted. I've just got something thrown off my cupboard in the hallway.
Tell me all about what's happened. What's happened live as you are communicating? What's happened?
Well, something's just been thrown in my hallway and there's nobody else in the house with me.
Yes, because you are home alone.
Yes, right. Anyway, slight distraction over. I'm going to ignore it. I'm paying no attention to that this evening. So where can people send their interest, Kristian, for what it is that you've just done a call out for? What's the email that they can contact?
So you can hit, there's 2 emails there. So you can hit media@assap.ac.uk. That comes through to me, as well as publications if you'd like something to write. So publications@assap.ac.uk. That would be fantastic if you could, come and help on board. Like I said, we as the committee are members just like you. We just chose to toss our hands in, put some hats on and help out. We would actually like you to come and do the same with us too.
Wonderful, thank you. So this evening we have Chris, who is going to be talking about the Pembrokeshire Triangle, I believe. So most people will know Chris here from his presentations and co-hosting with Seriously Strange, at least, I think, for the last 15 months, something like that.
It's probably, you're probably right, yes.
Yeah, but do many of you actually know about Chris and who he is as a person? So I'm going to give you a little bit of a roundup of a bio that we've got for him.
Okay.
So Kristian Lander is a filmmaker and producer with a boundless curiosity for the mysteries that lurk just beyond the ordinary. As the creative force behind podcasts like The Unearthly Bureau, Phenomenal Nottinghamshire, and Our Curious World, he spent years as a producer and a host, weaving tales that dive deep into the offbeat, the unexplained, and the 14. So from a young age, Kristian's insatiable wonder has propelled him into a world of quirky discoveries and strange encounters. A proud member of ASSAP since 2011, Kristian stepped into a committee role in January 2025, so we're coming up for a year anniversary of him being on board. And he brings his passion for the peculiar to the forefront, recently stepping in to produce the Seriously Strange magazine, as well as obviously the podcast that we do on a weekly basis. Beyond that, he has a regular voice on today's news talk, joining Unpacking Current Affairs and Geopolitics. He is a voice actor for Star Trek animated show, and when he's not chasing stories of or shaping soundscapes, Kristian roams the globe, camera in hand, crafting travel video logs that capture the strange, the beautiful, and the quirky. What's his quirky obsession? Well, Kristian is very weird. He likes to take eccentric shots of lampposts, and we've actually now called that hashtag lamppost porn for those that don't know. So this evening, Kristian, please step up from the green room.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much. I mean, today I'm actually stepping in many ways for Eamon von Harris, who unfortunately he's been ill. He's been taken down by the flu. So I'm stepping in really to cover him. I'm looking forward to speaking to Eamon very, very soon, as Malcolm has highlighted in the chat box there. So as many of you are aware, we went to an ASSAP training weekend in Pembrokeshire just a couple of weekends ago, and I was asked when I went there to basically make a presentation about what had happened in Pembrokeshire. So that's what I did, really. But actually, it was on the back of another presentation I was doing called The State of Understanding of UAP. So I'd like to combine them two together and to provide you a presentation today. But before we do, I'd really like to share something with you, something that happened this week about this particular show. So I made a video and I put it on Facebook and on our Twitter and X page, really, of something fantastic that happened for ASSAP this week. So let me just share this video file with you, everyone. And you guys might like this because every one of you are involved with making this happen. So I think video file here to share. I'll share my sound. Let me grab this file. It's going to be a bit exciting. It's called ASSAP Wrapped. It's time. It's that time of the year when we talk about Wrapped. Wrapped is a kind of a montage of updates and information and some really cool stuff behind the scenes of every Spotify listener. They kind of have a Wrapped package that comes to them every year. But for us as creators, we get a rather interesting view. And I want to take you on this journey with me and Caroline here. We are seeing this for the very first time. And this is the 2025 Seriously Strange Wrapped for Creators. So let's go. It's been quite the year for you, it says. Okay, click this. This year, one episode rose above the rest. Your top 2025 episode was Behind Weird Britain, Andy McGrath. So we need to get him on the show as soon as possible, because he was played 89% more than the average episode. And we're still quoting it. Maybe. But let's talk video. Your fans couldn't look away. Well, your show was in the top 15% of videos on Spotify. And believe me, I put the time in to make them look as super shiny as possible, from presentations to talk to panels. How do you make it look attractive and enticing? Clearly, I'm doing something right. You know, even if sometimes I think I'm not. But clearly, top 15% of videos on Spotify, and we're there. Wells. Hot takes, love notes, and everything in between. I quite like this little squirrely thing. So your most used emoji was thumbs up, and 19 comments in the UK left comments. And the most comments were left on March 15th, 2025, many moons ago. So let me share that. So we launched Seriously Strange onto Spotify at the beginning of March. And your listening passport got a real workout. 11 countries overall reached. Your top countries include Belgium, the Netherlands, the United States, Australia, and the United Kingdom. Of course, that's where most of our user base is. Let's Let's see what's next. Top fans assemble. Your show made it into the top of many fans' lists. Excellent. You're a top 10 show for 41 fans. Okay, it's a good start. And you're a top 5 show for 27 of those fans. Okay, good. And you're the number 1 show for 12 fans. Brilliant, cool. And 20% of them binge 2 episodes in one day. That's dedication, I agree. So it goes without saying your fans have great taste. What else are they listening to? So this is what our fans are also listening to. So they listen to Aurora, Gunship, Amy McDonald, Ghost, and Five Finger Death Punch. Yeah, fair enough. Good choices. Top audiobooks include Into the Uncanny, The Bhagavad Gita, Strange Things in the Wood, Dead Man's Mirror, Agatha Christie's Poirot, and Rainy Day Stories by Enid Blyton. And top shows listened to our listeners include Last Podcast on the Left, The Law Podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, The Paranormal Life, and After Dark. Okay, you might want to frame this. A 2025 instant hit show, your debut season was more popular than 91% of other new shows. Okay, that's pretty awesome. And 91% of other new shows. I mean, there's a new podcast like every week, every day. A 2025 most talked about show. You received more comments than 97% of other shows. Now, let me say something about that, because I do ask. Please please follow, and leave a comment, because it's the only way we know that what we're doing works. Leave a comment, please, 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 please. Leave a comment. And a 2025 most shared show. You received more shares than 94% of other shows. That's crazy. I sometimes think we're not doing enough. Wow. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you from ASSAP, thank you from myself, who puts the effort to produce these shows up, and they go out to our fans, our members, and the wider internet for our fans. And so there we are. Caroline. So I'm aware that I shared this to you, my love. Are you aware we're actually one of the top 15 shows on Spotify, which is the world's #1 podcast listening platform?
I am now, but I thought it was some kind of joke when you said it to me. I thought, how on earth are we up there with 91% of most popular, most shared? You know, it just blows all imagination, to be honest with you. I don't know. I mean, you're doing an incredible job, Chris. Absolutely incredible job. I've never seen the content being provided as high quality as it has with you on board. So for that way, brilliant work. And I can only thank you for what you do for ASSAP.
Yeah, so I saw that when I think that was Saturday that video was sent to us. But yeah, the top 15% of video podcasts on Spotify, and we're in that, and that's mind blowing to me. So anyway, today it's 1:15. People have joined by now. Let's get on with today's episode. So this is our welcome slide of the Understanding the State of UAP. So let's look at what this is and what this is all about. So the first question perhaps I should ask you is that, have you seen something unexplained in the sky up there above you? Have you seen anything? Raise your hand if that is the case, because many people have. And then we're going to outline some of our agenda today, and we're going to end with a nice big plump section of our presentation talking about the Broadhaven Triangle, the Defed Enigma, the Defed Triangle, if you will, from 1977 from Pembrokeshire, a bizarre series of actions and events that happened and captured that moment in time that's well recorded throughout history, because that is where our ASSAP training weekend took place just a few weeks ago. Many members of ASSAP took the opportunity to go into Pembrokeshire and engage with that training education programme. So this slide deck is going to consist of some evidence-based overview of UAP phenomena as of November 2025 when it was put together. It's going to blend that global momentum with a European and UK Pacific lens as well. So let's move forward through our presentation today. The one thing I have to say, you'll have to forgive me, is that I don't particularly like contents pages. I think a presentation is a showcase, but ultimately it's really useful to see what we're going to be talking about. For many, it's ghosts, it's spooks that are the anchor point for their foray into the anomalous, research into encounters, gathering of reports and interviews and so on. But there's an appreciation that the UAP topic is buzzing, and as such, it's not often a focus. So my aim here is to provide an anchor point of education and a way to move forward through the topic, really. And I promise you one thing, that I don't have the answers to many of the questions that are going to go on. Bit odd for a presentation to say I don't know the conclusion, but we are going to dive into those events of 1977. We're going to be talking about the Defan Triangle. We're going to be talking about the end of the modern era of ufology. Let's define some terminology, look at the nuclear position. It's going to be interesting, so come along with me for a ride here, and let's move forward. So the introduction, let's bring us to a unified position, as it might be common knowledge, and those who know it's necessary to establish the basics, so we're all talking from a standard perspective and grounded point. So UAP refers to unidentified aerial phenomena, if you listen to NASA's definition from 2023, or you can look at the Department of Defense definition, where it is slightly different. And we're going to look at that in just a moment. But what these are really is, they're not necessarily extraterrestrial, but they may be unexplained tech, because they are defying known physics. And for the sake of completionism, we are going to use the term UAP as opposed to UFO. The UFO is a kind of unidentified flying object term, as many of us well know, and that was coined back by the US Air Force in 1952. And it implies that it's a flying object, often interpreted as a structured craft, and it carries, as such, some heavy cultural baggage. Aliens, little green men, conspiracy theories, Hollywood, flying saucers, Roswell, X-Files, you name it, all those things come to mind when we talk about those, when it comes to flying objects, then the flying saucer. So this stigma, because of that, makes the serious discussion of the topic difficult, particularly when you're talking about military personnel and pilots. They've hesitated to report sightings due to the fear of ridicule and so on. So the new term UAP gained traction in 2020 with the Pentagon's UAP task force, the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, later the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena. Shift became a standardized phrase in 2021 as part of the ODNI preliminary report and the creation of Arrow in 2022. And the reasons for that change, directly from the DoD and NASA, is to destigmatize the particular topic, to encourage the reporting for military and commercial pilots without career risk. But more accurate and more broader, phenomena includes things such as lights, sensor artifacts, atmospheric effects. So again, we're now not assuming a solid object or something that flies in the conventional way. It allows us to use a much more richer tapestry of words and understanding. There is, of course, a national security focus. It treats these unknowns as potential flight safety threats or advanced adversarial tech, drones, hypersonics from potential characters, should we say, such as China, Russia, Iran, those who may have advanced technology, not extraterrestrial by default. As I said, we're going to move into what those are, but we do know from 2022, we now include in unidentified anomalous phenomena that it now includes transmedium vehicles, or vessels, or craft, or other, that move between different states. So they can go from the water to the air to space, and move between those objects, move between those states. Depending on it, has stated that it allows us to reduce the stigma and allows a more scientific, more transparent approach without the preconceived alien connotation. So what are the 5 key points that make these separate? Is they are omnidirectional travel and acceleration, hypersonic speed, low observability, transmedium travel, as we mentioned there, and apparent anti-gravitational lift. UAPs are a security issue because it's not for little green men. There's actually a legitimate safety concern. And of course, we saw David Grush, Dave Fravor come forward, and from a testimony from a pilot's point of view, from their air safety frame perspective, their testimonies pledged to make the topic about flight safety. Because also there are things flying in and around military vehicles in secure airspace that should not be there. We don't know who they are, where they're from, and as they are flying awfully close to vehicles. And so that puts them at risk. And that has allowed those training materials to be declassified. That has allowed the context of conversation to be brought up as far as the congressional level in the United States, and therefore to allow programs to seriously investigate them. By going that way, it's a really interesting platform of pushing the idea to be discussed at a serious level that these things potentially are a risk. But because we come from, of course, a time when science, speculation, and security evolved from the Cold War curiosity, but now we have 21st century implications. So it's really important that we take that into consideration. And when we take that into consideration, we have to talk about the modern era of ufology. What was once referred to as what's called post-Roswell, shall we say, is the modern era of ufology. And this period sort of includes the end of the Second World War, or perhaps it's more accurate to say that the modern era of ufology mirrors the atomic age, the ramping up of military and technology, a focus towards our former allies, like Russia, for instance, the demonization and the creation of the Iron Curtain used to justify further and further funding to push the science of destruction. The modern era of ufology is traced back to that atomic dawn of 1945, but it's less of a calendar. As I say, it's a reflection of the atomic age. The Roswell alleged debris in New Mexico, we know that it happened. It is on the books, it is on the records as something crashed. Of course, they have mentioned there has been many reasons, and many reasons why it was secured and why that it was classified in many different ways. Now, what they are, that's not for us to discuss right now. But we're going to use it as a point of reference to say this was the beginning of the modern era, shall we say. So we had that geopolitical tremor that birthed NATO, the Iron Curtain, but this also allowed the funding of black budget laboratories where exotic propulsion was whispered amongst conventional jets. So you have, well, it was mirrored, I'm trying to say that it was mirrored to exist alongside conventional jets. The Cold War was effectively an arms race, but not really about megatons, but it was about the very duel against the very physics of flight, where the public marvelled at the U-2 and the SR-71 Blackbird. Radar scopes were detecting something a little bit different. Los Alamos, Malmstrom, Bilekrovich logged objects, flying at nearly impossible speeds, dropping from 80,000 feet in the sky down to sea level in a near heartbeat. Curious observers, are interested in what else is flying around our skies. Or again, Roswell, if it is to be believed, shall we say, there were also a number of other craft in and around the same time period that are also characterized as UAP events. So Maury Island, for instance, in Tacoma, Washington, a donut-shaped object 100 feet in diameter allegedly exploded or malfunctioned, and the debris of that was in the form of a molten slag, and that then rained down on Harold Dow's boat, damaging it and injuring his son. And here enters Kenneth Arnold. He's a businessman. He's a private pilot who flies search and rescue missions. And he finds himself at a really interesting crux point in history, but he is the person who we get the term flying saucer from. But he had not one encounter that is often the most quoted, but there was a number of events in and around the same time that he is a part of. It's worth mentioning here that he is connected to. So the 24th of June, 1947, while searching for a downed marine CO-46 near Mount Rainier, he spotted 9 objects from his cockpit at 9,200 feet, and these were travelling that he clocked more than 1,200 miles an hour, and he used the phrase that we perhaps all know and love, that they were like saucers on water. And his piloting credentials gave him and his report some credibility with the press and the military. And on July 7th, 1947, Arnold personally investigated a crashed disc crash at Newman's Ranch in Pendleton, Oregon. He interviewed witnesses, examined the site. He reported the debris fragments to military intelligence. And that led him to Harold Dahl. He contacted Kenneth Arnold and says, hey, I've got some stuff here. You really need to come and look at this. He was seeing the media reports, and he invited him out, and that happened on July the 30th. And when Kenneth examined those slag samples and interviewed witnesses, Army Air Force intelligence then flew in to investigators to collect the debris. But they, unfortunately, crashed. The craft that they took the samples from, and those investigators died due to a crash that happened on takeoff. All the debris was then destroyed, never to be known of again. But with these three in close succession, the media had whipped up this storm. While we're off to the race, is it now the flying saucer craze of the 1950s? Little Green Men and The Day the Earth Stood Still, still one of the best film titles I could happen to agree with, one of the best titles ever. But then there was this fear in the 1950s of there's a fear of invasion. There's a fear, I guess, amplified by the Cold War of what potentially could come to the shores of the United States. There was what began from that point then was an escalation of other phenomena within the same topical space. Abductions then, cattle mutilations, crop circles, that weird crossover with magic and hippies and cult pop TV in the early 70s. That does continue today in the paranormal convention circuit. You can't help but go to look at the stalls of these paranormal conferences where you find crystals and trinkets and so on. The kind of hippie culture still exists in that space. There is also, how do you put it? There is this suggestion also that the National Socialists of Deutschland, of Germany, were in possession of, having found, or were developing, or were in cooperation of, something unknown, and insert your idiom here, that is deemed to be exotic technology, which has been the topic for thousands and thousands of books and online discussion for great length. But that period of post-World War II, there is a motion that we're seeing developments of technology that appear to be running in parallel. You have the conventional technology, such as rocket propulsion, jet propulsion, and so on, and in the same time span, the weird stuff, black triangles, flying Vs, Tic-Tac shaped vehicles, developing alongside one another. So perhaps one is more under lock and key, but is also developing that as a technology. We had, of course, at the end of World War II, more known now, thanks to the internet, is Operation Paperclip. That brought a number of scientists under full amnesty from the National Socialist regime in Germany to the United States to continue their development on rocketry and indeed Townsend Brown's papers and other stuff too. So are we still in the modern era? I suggest not. I think that has come to an end. That period of time where many people were interested in the topic, they got locked into it. That has been the modern era of ufology, that 1947 to 2017. And that changed, of course, with what happened in the New York Post. We have the 2004 USS Nimitz incident, the Tic-Tac event. You have the 2021 Pentagon UAP task force being set up. You also have what was going on behind the scenes, the funding of Robert Bigelow and so on. Classified secrecy to public disclosure via the ODNI reports from 2021 to 2025. There is a chronological timeline that you can imagine here that we are now moving towards what some would say is a disclosure of a degree. We should now consider ourselves to be in the disclosing era, not the disclosure era, the disclosing. Because, there are characters who have come forward who've said certain stuff that is really important, that I think is worth listening to. But where we go next is up to them, really, and up to how we process the information data that has come forward. But let's just flip forward one step here. That is to understanding UAP's definition. What even is it? Let's look at these two reports here, how NASA identifies this. So, in 2023 to 2025, the UAP definition: observations of events in the sky that cannot be identified as aircraft or other known natural phenomena. However, the Department of Defense and AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Research Office, has a slightly different take on that definition. It's observations of events in the sky that cannot be identified from a scientific perspective. So, we have 800 new UAP reports as of 2024. That was up 20% from the previous year, with 2025's projections at the time expected to increase beyond that. There are key trends that are observable, such as there are clusters near military sites. You also have to look at the data-driven approach here. UFOs are UAP aren't fringe, they're now quantifiable anomalies. So what about Europe? Where do we get our data and our stats from? It's really interesting to see how Europe does differ in its approach to UAP compared to the United States, that does dominate the media contextual space. So let's look at these. So how Europe defines and categorizes UAPs is there is a scientific focus. European entities prioritize evidence-based inquiries, such as Japan's public database, over speculation. But they do mirror NASA's approach. They have much less funding, and there is, understandably, a more fragmented approach. But only France has a dedicated unit, and EASA have no UAP protocols. ESSA, so in September 2025, ESSA established a single point of contact for UAP and UFO inquiries to handle public and stakeholder reports systematically. And this builds on earlier suggestions, such as the 2020 Copernicus satellites being used to detect UAPs as a project. ESSA views UAPs as potential space debris and supports scientific scrutiny into aviation and orbital safety. The European Commission has no definition when it comes to unidentified anomalous cases. However, it has used a particular phrase in Parliament and acknowledges UAP as a safety threat and a national security issue. In 2023, President von der Leyen and the Commissioner Gabriel on enhancing near-Earth detection capabilities. Multiple 2024 and 2025 questions were raised and calls for an EU space law to include UAP monitoring and reporting system, say a European-wide system. So against citing risks to aviation and a lack of harmonisation, they in fact began a European UAP Day on the 20th of March 2024 at the European Parliament to discuss data collection within civil society. Now, France's take on this is interesting because it's more forthcoming and more open. In fact, we had a member of GPAN actually come onto the ASSAP webinars just a year ago to speak about their data gathering analysis. Now, they explicitly define UAP as unidentified aerospace phenomena, phenomenos aerospatius no identifiers, and that encompasses observations of events in the atmosphere and space that cannot be explained by any aircraft, natural phenomena, or human activities. So France's flagship UAP unit began in 1977, a year very important to our topic of conversation today. And they collect, analyse, and publicly archive their reports in a centralised UAP database. Now, hosted at the 2023 International UAP Conference, they emphasised transparent scientific investigations, classifications from A1 to D, which is identified to unexplicable, remains the world's only non-military government-funded UAP office, and it influences EU decisions. Italy still interchangeably uses UAP and UFO for unexplained aerial space events. In 2024, Italian MPs raised questions to the EU Parliament about harmonised reportings, citing numerous local sightings around military sites with a focus on space surveillance rather than UAP-specific studies. You also have ENTEL, which is ENTL, the European Network for Transparent Labs on UAP. It doesn't use a formal definition around UAP, but does frame UAP as anomalous events that need empirical study. But they also use the definition of unidentified anomalous phenomena, and they look at the sightings and emphasising a data-driven analysis. The ENTEL also is a social and academic research project, and they have the Enigma Labs which is 2023, they launched an app that basically allows the reporting and archiving of sightings. They have more than 270,000 reports that have been gathered by that, and they are partnered by EU institutions for aviation safety data. And both advocate that there is European-wide protocols to this. And they featured a 2025 European UAP Day, and they are the ones who are the pragmatic individuals behind this initiative. So what about the UK? What do we do? Very interesting how we define things in the UK. So this organisation here, who monitors our skies? Well, technically, it is the UK Ministry of Defence. In a written question posed by David Reed, Conservative from Exmouth and Exeter East, the Ministry of Defence was asked to clarify its policy on reporting unidentified aerial phenomena and whether any new material on the subject has been classified since the UK's previous declassification programme ended. So Pollard further highlighted that the MOD ceased to investigate reports of UAP from 2009. He explained the reasoning behind this is it is deemed more valuable to prioritise MOD staff towards defence-related activities. Pollard also confirmed that no new material has been classified on the subject since the cessation of the investigations. The MOD ceased to investigate reports of UFO and UAP in 2009 and has not classified any new material since. Now, for those interested in the historical reports, Pollard noted that all MOD files relating to UFOs have been created up until 2009, have been released to the National Archives. And as it says here, the position on UAP remains unchanged, which is, in over 50 years, no sighting reported to the Defence. So the Department of Defence has indicated the existence of any military threat to the United Kingdom. Intriguing indeed. Of course, because we sit outside of Europe, it's understandable we might have a very different perspective. I'm aware there are projects that are pressuring the government to release data, and I think the government's position is that we don't have any, although you must expect reports still come through of seeing strange stuff in the sky. It may be that we just choose to ignore it as it's raised up, much in the same way the US individuals have had a problem getting data around there, getting data released. Maybe UK pilots are also facing the same issue. That there is not a single unified platform that allows them to express what it is that they are seeing officially. But we must talk about what is known as the nuclear position, and the UAP interference and an interest, of course, in our global nuclear ability. The nuclear position refers to a reoccurring pattern in UAP phenomena reports, and that is the unexplained objects appear to target, manipulate nuclear weapon systems, often interpreted as a deliberate message against our nuclear escalation. This spans the US and the Soviet-Russian cases from the Cold War era. There are whistleblower testimonies and declassified insights that fuel calls for transparency. And I'm going to break down a few of those elements for you below. And as mentioned, they come from congressional records, veteran accounts, and investigative journalism. There's two really famous accounts that highlight how serious this is, and they're worth noting, even if it is perhaps gone over territory for those who already have a knowledge of the topic. In March 16th, 1967, Malmstrom Air Force Base over in Montana, 10 Minuteman ICBM, which is the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Systems, they went offline. Launch codes failed. Guidance systems shut down. While security personnel on the ground, looking up in the sky, they had a glowing orange-red disc-shaped UAP flying over their silos. Now, no human sabotage or technical fault could explain the situation, but the missiles were reactivated hours later without damage. A retired US AF Captain Robert Salas, he was the on-duty launch officer that day. He described that event in detail during the 2023 congressional hearings, which is the House Oversight Committee on UAP. He testified about what happened that day. The UFOs have repeatedly interfered with US nukes, citing it as a WTF warning about humanity's nuclear folly. And similar shutdowns have also occurred at Minnow Air Force Base, North Dakota, days earlier. So there is congressional scrutiny about this. That these were highlighted in the 2022 and 2023 NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act reports, and the Arrow report briefings, where former ATIP Director Lou Elizondo confirmed that UAPs brought offline nuclear capabilities at multiple sites. In 2021, the National Press Club featured 5 US Air Force veterans. They produced affidavits, leading to bipartisan pushes. Bipartisan means there is both sides of the political divide in the United States for declassification of nuclear UAP ties. More than 160 cases were documented in a book in 2008, Robert Hastings' UFOs and Nukes. It shows that there was a particular spike in cases from the end of World War II to the mid-1970s. The implication is seen, therefore, that there appears to be a non-hostile intervention. UAPs disarming, that is kind of seen as the perspective about this. They play with, maybe they are just working out what it is that we have and how they work. But on the other side of the Iron Curtain, a very different event actually occurred. On October the 4th, 1982, not the 1960s, there was a pivotal Cold War case. Although there are reports of events like this going back to the 1960s. It was the Osovo missile base in Kiev, in Ukraine, then part of the USSR, where 5 massive UFOs hovered over a facility for hours, and suddenly all the nuclear missiles activated spontaneously, launch codes displayed on screen, silos opened, and the systems went into full pre-launch mode, without any human input. Panic ensued, as you can imagine, as the officers feared that this was now going to be an unauthorized strike on the West. The missiles armed themselves for more than 30 seconds before deactivating as the UFOs vanished. Perhaps they realized what they had done and were like, we're out of here. But you can imagine for the witnesses, dozens of soldiers reported these objects that they were inspecting the silos with beams of light. This was investigated by the Soviet Ministry of Defense's classified UFO unit, known as Institute 22 in 1978, from when they began, which concluded that this was an intentional message from the UFOs. Declassified reports post-1991 describe many similar events where, in 1967, of course, Soviet ICBM tests where UFOs allegedly took control mid-flight. So this reveals there is a broader pattern. So Soviet archives revealed that there was more than 20 nuclear UAP incidents, mirroring those US cases as well, but rather than activating, some were deactivating. They clearly are playing, wondering what we have, what it is, and how they work. Journalist George Knapp, probably the most famous UAP reporter in the world, he gained access to these files in the 1990s, and he briefed Congress in 2023 of a warning of near misses that could have sparked World War III. So there's implication here that UFOs have demonstrated they have control over humanity's deadliest tech. And there was a moment in Lou Elizondo's book where he describes in 2021 his book Imminent, the Washington Moscow hotline that was set up in 1963, upgraded in 1971, post-Cuban Missile Crisis, where direct leader communication was put in place to avoid miscalculations. Soviet officers apparently were instructed to phone US counterparts during anomalous activations to confirm that their attack wasn't from them, to ring them up, as it were, just in case, because it might not be us. And this kind of reiterates some of those points here. The nuclear position, as it were. So yeah, Robert Hastings with credible military witnesses, nuclear UAP incidents from 1945 to 2007. NICAP and FOFOR, they reported many high strangeness cases around nuclear facilities. Japan identified 28% of D-class unexplained cases near their nuclear plants in France. The Arrow 2024 report highlights that there are 12% of unresolved UAP cases that involve nuclear adjacent aerospace. So are they interested in their energy? Why we have such dangerous energy capability? Shutdowns, activations, you can see them as being non-lethal, but it is consistent that there is a global pattern that UAPs may be interested in their power generation. Now, this is an interesting one. This is an interesting point to understand. The nuclear position again. So we have here Kelvin Parker, a gentleman I have spent some time with on the telephone. We had a long conversation over Zoom prior to his book getting published. A wonderful gentleman I found him to be, with good humour. He was a grounded southern gentleman. He was a really cool guy to talk to. Unfortunately, he passed away just a few years ago. Of course, he is the centre character of the event known as the Pascagoula case, the closest story. And I got to meet him via Philip Mansell and the Flying Disc Press. with the release of his book Pascagoula and his encounter, his story behind that. A really good book, worth reading. Is written not as a strict book. It's a personal encounter of his series of events from his perspective. Really interesting. But let's dial ourselves back. So to what is known as the Nimitz encounter. The Nimitz you can see there in the bottom right corner. You're going to see how these two topics tie together very shortly. So the USS Nimitz is the lead ship in the Carrier Strike Group, the Nimitz Carrier Strike Group, oddly enough, and it contains the F-18 Super Hornets, known as the Black Aces Squadron. There is pilot in 2004. There's Commander Dave Fraser. He's the squadron CEO. You have Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich. You have Jim Slate. You have Commander Chad Underwood. He's the FLIR video operator. And you have Senior Chief Kevin Day, who's on the USS Princeton, as the radar operator. All these have come forward to testify the data and the events that happened during this particular time. Between November 10th and November 2023, multiple radar detections. In fact, the USS Princeton picked up more than 100 unidentified objects at 80,000 feet, dropping to sea level in less than 1 second. So you can only imagine the G-forces behind this. The objects hover, sometimes 20,000 feet above the ocean, tracked for days. They have no flight plans, they have no transponders, and they're pinging. But these are seen as beings that they experience near daily during their operations. There is a visual intercept, what is known as the Tic-Tac encounter, on November 14th. Dave Fraser and Dietrich decide to launch an investigation while they're out on manoeuvres. They go to a merge point, and they see the white, oblong, Tic-Tac-like object. 40 feet long, there's no wings, there's no rotors, there's no propulsion systems, and the object mirrors their circling manoeuvres, and then accelerates away instantly to hypersonic speed, vanishing in seconds into the distance. As Fraser says, it's like it knew why we were there. There was also, he reported in the Joe Rogan Experience, that there was a massive disturbance under the water, suggesting there was some submerged activity and may have been something coming to the surface that was very, very large. The FLIR video that you can see online is often known as FLIR 1. This is infrared footage, so it's outside of the visual spectrum. It shows that the object accelerating left at extreme G-forces. The quote is there's a whole fleet of them. Look at that thing, dude. Objects that appear on radar 60 miles away in 0.8 seconds, which means it's travelling in Mach 30, and it moved to their training cap point, where they were scheduled to do manoeuvres and perform operations, meaning that the objects read and were informed of the privileged information that there was on board their flight plan computers on board their aircraft, and they then read them and then went to where it was that they were going to go next. So the pirates were debriefed afterwards. Their tapes were confiscated by unknown officials in suits. They have that Men in Black vibe going on, and there's no public acknowledgement of this for 13 years. And then, of course, you have the 2017 New York Times article that the Pentagon then confirmed the authenticity of those FLIR videos and others that have been released since. And we have now been off to the races, as we say. In 2020, the Department of Defense officially labels it UAP, unidentified, and it exhibits flight characteristics beyond known technology. And the ODNI report from 2021 lists the Nimitz case in that other bin. Not US secret tech. These have been seriously investigated. They are not weather, they are not foreign adversary, they are still unknown. In 2023, of course, you had the congressional testimony where Fraser testified under oath. The technology we witnessed was far superior to anything we had. It was the first modern UAP case to have multi-sensor data. That includes radar, FLIR, visual, trained military witnesses, a chain of custody of information, gathering tools, and zero conventional explanation. In further interviews that have gone on since then, he's spoken numerous times about the large body that's under the surface of the water, and this ties to other whistleblower releases and statements that there is something potentially in our oceans. So how does this tie back to the Pascagoula case of 1973? It's worth noting some of the details of this particular case. So we have two witnesses for this event. We have Charles Higson, who's 42, he's a shipyard wielder, and Calvin Parker, who's also a welder. So they work in the shipyards. Can you guess which shipyards they worked at? The incident So they were night fishing. They were on a riverbank, and the pair heard a whirring noise above them. They saw a blue-lit oval craft, said to be up to 40 feet in diameter, descend suddenly, and a robotic claw seized their legs, possessed by a strange creature that floated them on board. Inside, they found 3 to 4 wrinkly grey-skinned beings that were 5 foot tall, with claw-like hands, slit mouths, no eyes, and one talked telepathically. The iconic look there is on the front cover of that book. They were paralysed on the table. They were scanned by an eye device, and they were released about 20 minutes later. There was no probes and no harm done. But you can imagine, these are two kind of like blue-collar workers living their life, going about their usual routine of going fishing. The next thing they know, they're confronted with the unexplained, and it has made a lifelong impression upon them. So in the aftermath of that, they called authorities. There's a secret police tape that captured their genuine terror. Polygraphs were passed. Hickson stuck to his story lifelong. Parker initially actually recanted under pressure, and he reaffirms this in his 2018 book, Pascagoula, The Closest Encounter. And of course, as I said, I got to speak to Kelvin for a good hour or so. He was one of the most salt-of-the-earth, grounded fellows I think I've ever got to speak to. He had that southern drawl, he had a sense of humour. The case actually was investigated by J. Allen Hynek, of course famous for the Project Blue Book, and it remains one of UFO's ufologists' most credible abduction cases, due to the consistency and the emotional impact. Now, Parker died in 2019, aged 64. And Irina Scott, now she has a PhD from the Uni of Idaho, and she's a veteran researcher. She was a former US Air Force employee in the 70s and the 80s, and she has been known for analysing declassified documents on UFO crashes and cover-ups, and she's appeared on multiple interviews, documentaries, and so on. And her work has been often around exploring government secrecy around these UAP incidents, and she uncovered that the Nimitz incident, the lead ship, and the class of nuclear warship that the United States has, was under construction at the very shipyards, the Huntington Ingalls Industries docks. It turns out that's not quite true. Not that Pacific ship, anyway. But there is, of that particular class, the Nimitz class carriers were designed and constructed there, destroyers, amphibious ships, and so on, but not the Nimitz itself. But it does show that there is this nuclear shadow tickling more than one of the famous encounters in ufology. Now here are some, I've just taken a snapshot of these. There is many figures. You can have a look at this if you want to get close to this. I can perhaps bring them up on camera a little bit closer for you. So we can share this. It's content only. There we go. Spotlight key figures here. There's David Grush, congressional testimony on non-human biologics. Lou Elizondo talking there, as well as the 2025 updates from Era director John Koloski on recovered materials. Let's just look at what he says here. Some UAP exhibit transmedium and exotic propulsion characteristics. Recovered materials under analysis. There are materials that we have recovered with isotopic ratios not found on Earth. You have the US been involved with retrieval and reverse engineering for decades. These people are in serious positions. They are putting their careers on the line, and they are stating these things are true, have happened. Immaculate Constellation is a really particular topic worth looking at, and Matthew Brown gave testimony, well, not testimony as such, and he did give testimony too, but he spoke at length on the Weaponized podcast with George Corbell, with Corbell and George Knapp about the Immaculate Constellation program, which is a program that he perceives might be AI driven, that where there's a systematic removal of reports of UAP related phenomena and accounts on the CIA's internal database. So they're being scrubbed or put to one side, or perhaps moved to a different location that he, even as a CIA analyst who has full carte blanche over the database, cannot see. So he thinks there's something happening there. He submitted the Immaculate Constellation document, which kind of covers those particular cases. Really interesting, deep interview. Definitely go worth check that out. We've got to support our people in the same field as we are. Let's see if you can move on from this. Next page, please, Christian. Oh, there we go. There we go. jump forward a bit more. So, but we do want to stay on a grounded perspective, right? We kind of also want to know about the European hotspots, sightings over the continent, as it were. Focus on Europe. 2024 to 2025 waves of more than 300 reports in the EU's MET, ASSAP, and national agencies. That's such as GPAN, the MOD, and so on. Spherical orbs over the Baltic Sea from NATO reports from January 2025. Triangular formations over RAF bases in August 2024. And European map with pinpoints of hotspots, as you can see. There's not really a timeline of incidents. They are a bit of a scattering of reports. There's no real focus on how many each of these dots represent a cluster and so on. But there are some talking notes. A really interesting guy I really would like to draw your attention to. He's been a supporter of ASSAP, and that's Ash Ellis over at UFO Identified, the guys who do the Pursuit for the Paranormal podcast. They are in direct contact with the police forces of the UK, and every year they produce their report of unidentified objects that have been reported to police and emergency services, and sought to catalogue those. He's got, I guess, will be his 2025 report will be out in the next few months as we move into 2026. But yeah, there's 650 to 850 civilian pilot reports 2024 through 2025, and they are drones, orbs, and triangles. So Europe is experiencing the biggest wave of unexplained aerial incursions since the 1990s, particularly over sensitive military installations. So what are the figures then? We have some weird figures here. And we have to take into consideration some factors that were happening at the time. So in the United Kingdom, 180 to 220 sightings are logged through, as you can see, the NUFORC and United Kingdom Military Defence Leaks. Lakenheath and Mildenhall drone swarms that were happening in late 2024, early 2025. These mirrored what was happening in the United States, particularly with the New Jersey wave and the Belgian wave that was also happening. However, with Lakenheath, Mildenhall, and those other similar UK sites, there is a difference there in that there was a report that went to The Independent, which was a UK newspaper, that came to them from a German newspaper and German sources, and they were like, hey, you guys need to publish this, look at this data here. It shows that there are a number of Russian assets, shall we say, that have come from embassies across Europe, and they've made their way to the United Kingdom. We have tracked their phone positions, and they appear to have been operating as vegetable, fruit pickers and so on in the period of time, and it shows that they were operating drones in that very space where these incursions were happening. And of course, we have an inflated number because, of course, there are multiple reports being logged. It might be one object, but you might have 50 reports from different people. Due to how social media works, of course, people are sharing, they're something in the sky, and then the reports get logged. So you have an escalation of numbers due to multiple sightings by different people of the same object, if you know where I'm coming from with that. So France had a situation, of course, triangular and UFO reports from Paris and South, and GPAN logged an increase in their catalogue documentations, incursions over US and NATO bases, such as Ramstein in Germany. The Belgium, Netherlands also saw a bit of a wave increasing, Scandinavia too. Nordic UFO groups tracking that increase in numbers. So, what does that mean? So we're going back to that 1977 wave. Let's go talk about that. That's something a bit more lighter than hardline data. And you can appreciate why, perhaps. So Broadhaven, what is the Broadhaven Triangle? And why is it important to our topic here? So Broadhaven is a coastal area where a mass sighting, famously, of a primary school back in 1977 saw an object land. We're going to talk about that in a second. But the triangle consists of broadly 3 points. We can say broadly because it's like the Bermuda Triangle. It's not strictly speaking 3 points. It just happens to be in 3 locations where people have reported stuff happening, and they go, oh, it's a triangle. And we seem to want to impose a shape or a space or a location where these things are happening. But broadly speaking, actually it contains the area surrounding it. Like, again, the Bermuda Triangle, any object disappears in the Atlantic, it's instantly the fault of the Bermuda Triangle. It's the same kind of thing applies here. Because there, of course, are reports of stuff in Milford Haven, of stuff happening off the west coast, more outside of that triangle of Baldy, Littlehaven and Haverford West. But what we have in 1977 is more than 450 reported incidents is in 1 year. There's credibility of witnesses, they include the children and the adults alike, and the phenomena has also been most recently explored in a Netflix documentary series called Encounters. So let's dive into why this has relevance to this. So in 1977, we had mass sightings, there were entities being seen, black helicopters being seen, there was objects coming down, landing in next to school fields and so on. 2024, 2025, we saw an uptick, also July. In 2025, we saw low-altitude plasma balls being reported off the Welsh coast, per local MUFON reports. There are links to military exercises, because of course you have a number of RAF testing ranges nearby. It's a detailed map, as you can see on the screen. It may be that people take it very personally that they see something. And if you're there, maybe you believe that you are the epicenter that might be advanced tech being played with, or something from external places is coming to visit. Let's move forward. And I'm sure many of us, again, are broadly aware of the Broadhaven Triangle, the Defend Triangle, as it was first coined back in 1977. Why is this significant to this? Is, as I said, ASSAP did its training program, its most recent education program in the triangle, in the Defend Triangle, as part of the Broadhaven investigation there. Let's recap some of those reports, because of course it was many years ago, 48 years ago, happened in 1977, the February the 4th, and in the weeks and months that followed is arguably the most remarkable period in Pembrokeshire's recent history, when a class of pupils from Broadhaven Primary School said that they had spotted a UFO in their playground, well, just beyond their playground, in some shrubland. And David Davies is the most widely quoted person. He was 10 at the time. There are reports of those people still talking about that case today. He says in 2017, when he spoke to BBC Wales, "I was a natural-born sceptic. So after the bell rang, I decided to go to the area and see what the children had been talking about. I wanted to see it too, what they had seen." He describes seeing a silver, cigar-shaped craft with a dome covering the middle third. My sighting lasted only a couple of seconds. It popped up and then went back behind a tree. It moved. Mr. Davis says that he did not feel afraid, but more in awe and in wonderment. But he admitted that he had a strange desire to run away. Now, he is often the most quoted individual from this series of events. And what we have here is a video from Newsround that was reported at the time. Let's have a listen.
Well, I saw the spaceship. I didn't see the man. The spaceship, it looked a cigar shape with a dome on it. And it had a yellowy, orange to red light on the top of it.
How clearly did you see it?
Well, I couldn't see its face because it was too far away.
Oh, you say you saw a man as well, did you?
Yes.
And what about him?
Well, he was too far away to be seen as well.
My friend Philip here was trying to find a way over the stream, and I was looking at the bushes up the top of the trees. And then suddenly this silver cigar-shaped object seemed to pop up from behind the bushes and trying to take off. Then it disappeared again.
Are you sure it wasn't perhaps just a helicopter or an aircraft from the airfield near here?
A helicopter could land there, but that's private property over there. And if they landed there, they could be prosecuted. And with an aircraft, the only thing that could get in there was a Harrier.
Were you frightened at the time?
Yes.
Why?
Well, I thought there would be a whole arm inside there or something.
Okay, there we go. That's David there. So now none of the teachers believed the children at first, but the headmaster had an ingenious idea. He separated them and got them to draw what it is that they saw. There are slight variations, of course, but what they draw is broadly the same. Now, Mr. Davis describes the days that followed as a bit of a wild roller coaster. It went wild, the crazy in the media, and it was difficult to settle down and actually think about what we had seen. 2 months later, Rosa Grenville, she ran the Haverford Hotel at nearby Littlehaven, and she described an object that she said was an upside-down saucer. There was two faceless humanoid creatures that had pointed heads. She said that so much heat came off this, and it quoted as being My face felt burned. There was light coming from it, flames of all colours, and creatures came out of those flames. That's what I don't understand. When she visited the field, there were 2 inches of burn marks on the floor. Now, so one of them was the sighting at the Grade 2 listed building, that is Haverford's Hotel. It's located just in Little Haven. Now, at the time, the hotel, again, was run by Rosa Grenville, and in 2016, her daughter, Francine, recalled what her mother had seen in 1977 when speaking publicly. She said, "My mum, Rosa, was a no-nonsense kind of woman. This is very much out of character. She is not the sort of person who would believe in aliens. It was an early morning. Mum was awoken by a buzzing noise. She thought that she left the gas boiler on. But once downstairs, that she realised that the noise was outside. And she looked outside, 100 feet away. There was an oval object that she could only describe as being a spacecraft that had lights slowly. With a spacecraft with lights, and it slowly landed. 2 figures emerged in silver suits. She was terrified because these figures, although reminiscent of men, had exceptionally long arms and legs. Their heads were covered with helmets, and she referred to them as creatures. Now, Rosa sent a letter to her MP, Nicholas Edwards, that the incident had left her feeling agitated and disturbed, and not the least bit desirous to have another encounter. I love the kind of language of the 1970s. A number of theories were actually put forward to explain the sightings. The then MP for Pembroke, Nicholas Edwards, contacted the Ministry of Defence after being inundated, of course, by UFO sighting reports, and he looked to resolve the constituency's concerns. Now, Flight Lieutenant Colonel Cohen, an officer from RAF Bawdrey, he visited Miss Grenville's hotel and examined the site, but he could find no evidence of a landing. He actually joked that should a UFO arrive at RAF Bawdrey, he would charge nominal landing fees. And in his report, he mentioned the possibility that there was a local prankster at work, and that the description of aliens fitted a kind of protection suit that is issued in the event of a fire on one of the local oil refineries. A grounded perspective indeed. And this fits in also with an account of businessman Glyn Edwards, who in 1996 revealed that he wandered around a park in a silver suit in 1977 as a prank. Now, quite why a person would be wandering around near a playground dressed in a foil suit should perhaps raise some questions, but of course this was 1977. The National Archives released files that examined these UFO sightings in Wales, and they were examined. And one of those reveals a rather interesting exchange. There's general speculation in the neighbourhood that a practical joker was at work here, wrote staff from S4, the government's department that investigated sightings at the time. It was thought that the school children could have confused a sewage tanker as a UFO, although many of them were from farming backgrounds. That entire area, even now, is predominantly farms rather than tourism. Its entire infrastructure of people and societal structure there and community were generally farmers, so they were very familiar with farming machinery. But more recently, a former US Navy sailor said that the figure in the silver suit was in fact a member of the US military personnel wearing a standard fireproof uniform, and that the UFOs were in fact the new Harriers just flying over the area as part of the test range. There was a conference in 2017 organised by SUFON, the Swansea UFO Network, to mark the 40th anniversary of the event. The organiser had Emlyn Williams had Davies on as a guest speaker who recounted his experience. Neil Spring wrote a rather interesting book, not one I have myself though, but I can quote from a few pieces from it. The Watchers, the book is called, and it's quoted in the BBC News article from South Wales from that time. The moment I heard of a small village being plagued by UFO sightings, I was inspired to understand what really happened. He said, my research uncovered a secret investigation by military police. The Watcher author Neil Spring uncovered documentation that includes a letter from the head of MOD's S4 wing to Provost Security Services, the UFO's internal police force. The S4 chief wrote in his letter, I have not even told a minister that I'm consulting you, and I am calling for a discreet inquiry after expressing bewilderment at the number of level-headed witnesses to the strange activity. Whilst the government was telling the public they had no records of unusual activity in the area, privately it appears that officials were so concerned about the UFO sightings in Broadhaven that they've asked military police to conduct discreet investigations. Mr. Spring does conclude and believes that local pranksters were behind some of the sightings, and says that people emulate what's happening around them, but the pranks were inspired by the events of people who had made sincerely reported encounters. My research showed that the strange occurrences in Broadhaven were long before the incidents at the school and have continued for a long term afterwards. In fact, I found 2 reports of people who made reports also. I found on an obscure blog from June 12th, 2023, a user by the name of Bobby Joe. My class was from Bishop Hannon, and we saw the spacecraft. It was cigar-shaped, it was shiny silver, and was very close. It drifted closer towards the tree line at Pentebrae. The teacher, Mr. Healy, told us to sit down and not to be distracted, not to look out the window, and that was that. No one ever talked about it again, and I only saw it for a few seconds, but my classmates had a really good look. A user called Nota Tori or UKEPA, okay, it's their username, I didn't write it, from February 14th, 2022. I was a pupil at St Mary's Primary in Pennar, the Pembroke Dock, and I saw something. I saw something before this became a thing, and my mother told me off for lying. A few days later, she called me into our living room when the Welsh news was on, and she asked me if I had been telling the truth. There had been a report a few days earlier, after I had told her, but she dismissed it as childish fantasy. So, was this area really the epicenter of some really strange events that were happening? Let's also talk about another aspect of this particular case, or rather the censor of this book sat behind me, The Uninvited by Clive Harold from 1977. I think the book came out in 79, actually. So this book was actually from their mother's collection, who had remarkably survived all her hardships as a young adult and found its way into my collection. I can remember my mum telling me how much it disturbed her, in fact. It's an interesting book, told from a couple of perspectives. One is the Coombs family, and of course the writer's experiences in the time spent with the family. So it starts off really with a blue UFO, which she is perceived to be waving through the window. The lady in the house then encounters weird lights, huge white figures. There's a glowing disembodied hand, television sets, and cars blew their wiring. There's burn patches left in fields. Poltergeist phenomena kind of grips their household. And I said that the author, Clive Harold, he spent some time with that family, living in their home with them. And he documented the experiences living alongside the family. In the book, the farm is called the Ripley Farm, but it's actually called its real name is the Ripperston Farm. Clive did actually do a revisit to this book in 2019. It's not a book I've actually picked up since, but it is more of an update. It's perhaps worthwhile reading. I'm sure his insights after 30 years really provide some new insights to that. So what will you see today? Well, in fact, that building you can see on the left-hand side there is the house at the centre of the events. And there on the right-hand side you have the island that is seen to be where the UFOs appeared to either enter or go over the top of and perhaps dive over the back, and it gave the perception that they go inside the island. So what was seen in 1977 again was Cyril John. He was a local councillor. He was getting up early to go on the train to London. He noticed a light shining outside his bedroom window. He then saw a grey egg-shaped object that had a bright orange red light on the top of it, about 60 metres away from him. And he quotes, "The other object he saw was a 7 to 8 feet humanoid figure that was floating in the air like a parachutist about 30 feet away, and wore a silver-grey boiler suit. It was motionless before it just drifted away. That's surely really hard to hoax, and adds credence to the other sightings of these other tall humanoids, including Rosa Grenville having seen them in the field." So Sufon's network colleague Mike Morner said that in 1977 was perhaps the most active time of documented events that I've ever heard in South Wales. In particular, he says there's 21 reports of a cigar-shaped object hovering in the sky from Bridgend to Blackwood, Penarth to Pembroke. Again, is this the epicenter of some really strange tech? Now, as I wrote this, and as I went to promote this, of course, to the ASSAP membership, I received a message. In fact, I received a message from a very distinguished gentleman, a member of ASSAP, called Dr. Peter McHugh. Now, he was very keen and enthusiastic, and says, Kristian, you must go and check out my document. In fact, I wrote about this case in 2012, and he was very keen to express his knowledge of the case. So the book is called The Zones of Strangeness. Let me bring this over here so I'm not straining, I'm not looking away too much. An examination of paranormal and UFO hotspots. So I'm going to read an excerpt from his chapter here. It's chapter number 8 of this particular book. Definitely worth reading. Let's have a quick look here. And I'll bring it up on the screen for you. So he calls it The Tangled Tale of Ripperston Farm. Can I actually put this on the screen, perhaps? I can. Brilliant. Okay. So Ripperston Farm, about 3 miles from southwest of Littlehaven, was reportedly the site of anomalous phenomena in 1977. It was managed by Richard and Josephine Hewison, who lived nearby at Lower Broadmoor Farm. The farmhouse of Ripperston Farm was occupied by dairyman Billy Coombs and his family. And according to Pugh and Holiday, in their book from 1976, the next book right here, they had 2 sons, 3 daughters, and they moved there in 1974. But Harold was referring to an occasion that happened in 1977 and states the eldest daughter had been staying at their grandparents for 3 years by then, so she must have moved out of the Ripperton farm less than a year after. Alternatively, maybe that she never lived there at all. Of course, the UFO counters we are quite familiar with. We've spoken about them at length here, but they do have varying descriptions. And this ties into Peter McHugh's observation that there are multiple kind of, not misidentifications, but confusing identifications. So some of the dramatic stuff is slightly different in their tellings and their retellings. So there is a confusing narrative. The displaced cattle, of course, plays a very central part to this story. It's worth reading this here. So Pugh and Holiday refer to the number of occasions where a herd of cattle disappeared at night from Ripperston Farm and ended up in Broadmoor Farm. But after these disappearances, the gate to the yards would still be securely shut. So it's not clear how they left the field and appeared in a different field, in a different location. It's thought they may have escaped from their enclosure. Members of the Coombs household or their cattle dog Blackie would have heard them passing the farmhouse, but Evans refers to an unnamed neighbour, perhaps Caroline Klass, who said the family wouldn't have heard anything if the wind had been blowing, particularly if the TV or the radio had been on at the time. Billy Coombs showed Pugh and Holiday that a cement passage leads from the stockyard to the milking cubicles. It is gated at both ends. He said that one day, just after 6 a.m, he found 2 cows there locked in, and then he mentions of another incident that had occurred in broad daylight on the 15th of April, where he and his elder son had brought 16 pregnant to an outside pen. The father and son went to the milking parlour, and when Billy Coombs came out again, within a few minutes he found the pen empty, the gate was still shut, and we found the cows half a mile away at Broadmoor, a particularly long distance away. Let's, I think the last section here I thought was really interesting too. Missing items were found around the house, and it talks about the contradictory stories between strange visitors. So it's definitely worth picking this book up. It's worth to understand there is discrepancies in accounts, and of course over history that can happen. We know that the stories can be misremembered over time, and misremembered and changed. I think it's worth understanding that perspective and point of view. So what is Pembrokeshire 2025 like? Let's find out. When I'm actually clicking on the right screen. Pembrokeshire 2025. So we're going to call this trip the uninvited trip. So let's
We should play Alanis Morissette.
Let's make this full screen.
Oh,
we should do.
Supernatural senses going, so
Oh, Roch Castle.
Fiery red eyes, as these things tend to have.
Always red eyes, man. What is that about?
I think it's about the light. I mean, so many animals, like particularly crepuscular ones, they reflect, the eyes reflect back. went, and it was like, okay then.
Look where we are. We're at Broadhaven.
Building up on the ridge line here, the house wasn't there. That whole field of scrub, the kids came running in saying that they thought it was a helicopter or a tractor or there was like lights just into that scrub lane. So they'd come down and landed or fallen into that patch of scrub lane. And the assumption was that there was a farmer who was maybe bringing the tractor, but that was fairly unlikely. And from the description, they thought it might have been a muck spreader. Slurry spreader. But again, the teacher said, come on, stop messing about. In we go. And but the kids remained insistent.
UFO, wheelie, mid wheels, south wheels.
Do you think
what's hard to believe in it? Hard to believe. It's hard to believe. Kids' imagination, civilian aircraft maybe, and a chopper. I don't know.
The views are quite distinct, though, aren't they? The shape-wise.
Yeah, but only clouds are here, and nobody saw nothing.
Apparently not.
Yeah.
That's not it. Is this the one that was the hotel that the woman? Yeah. It was an Italian woman that owned it.
Rosa, yeah.
So. And she saw the giant silver-suited alien back there in the field, I think. And then that stack rock that the spaceships supposedly went to UAPs. Sorry.
Mom, the two children are driving back from going to the I think it's a quick save in Haverford West. Doesn't exist anymore. It's underneath where County Hall was. So they're driving along and they reach a point just about 100 yards away. That's why we stopped here, because we're now going to do that drive down to the farm. And the kids noticed that they were being followed by a light in the sky. And this light came closer and closer and was more harassing. And there had been other instances up to this point which led them to become a little fearful about what was actually this light represent. And the light menaced them and followed them all the way down to the farm entrance. And this is the stretch of road from when we take the bend in. Then I'll put my hazards on just to indicate when we hit that bit of road. And that was the point at which first of all they thought it was perhaps Coast Guard or an RAF rescue helicopter, and then it became much more threatening. They interpreted it much more threatening and much more menacing in the way it was seemingly aggressively following them, rather than just going in the same direction that they were. And that was the first of one of the most notable instances that were documented by Hugh Jones and later into the book. I think Neil Story writes about the uninvited, and he has this particular image of a very remote Welsh farmhouse, on a blasted hillside. It's actually slightly different, but you'll see the reality of it shortly. But so the kids are playing around, and now it's not quite. I've met the youngster. Oh, he's now a man, but now he refers to streetlights. Now I don't think the streetlights. So the original street lighting exists as it was back then. But he becomes aware of a very menacing, large figure. It's the silver suit. It's our friend, the silver-suited alien with the motorcycle visored helmet again. Who, again, I'm not going to go into the detail because it's so well documented. You can read the accounts for yourselves. I'm just bringing you to where it happened.
And there we have it. So, what is 2025's UAP world like? Well, we appear to have a number of verified videos and content that has been published to the open forum of the internet and beyond. We, of course, have here the famous Jellyfish from over Iraq, there's actually been a couple more that's actually been released in more recent times. Not visible in the light spectrum, but only visible by infrared. Appears to be some kind of hanging dome that has tentacles or some kind of tendrils hanging underneath it. We don't know what those purposes are of this. And these are some of the more interesting shapes. So, we were talking about earlier how the shape of UAP has changed. So that's still changing now. The identification of some of the things that have been seen do appear to change. We have, of course, a picture from the Go Fast there. That was travelling at some astonishing speed, captured on a FLIR camera. And the Tic-Tac there from that particular video from the Nimitz. We have a picture here, of course, of another jellyfish with a tendril hanging below it. And one of these manta ray craft too. So, of course, there is skepticism. It's absolutely right and true that skepticism should be part of your understanding. It's worth knowing that Arrow's report, they published a conclusion in 2025 to say that 80% of cases of UAP are identifiable. So what this means is to say that of all those weird cases that Arrow certainly has received and has documented and investigated, 80% they are saying, nope, there's a reality check here that they're not unidentified. Drones, balloons, optical illusions, that's not dismissal. I think it's an interesting filter to say that there are still 20% of those that aren't. They are in the other category. So pilots would hesitate. Intel officers self-censor. There's the same stigma that buried Project Blue Book in 1969, and it's perhaps costing us data. To say that there is a bracket of 80% that is just, we can ignore this, we looked, we checked, no. You have social media-fueled hoaxes. We have faster airspace monitoring. There's a stifling of military whistleblowers. There's tech R&D that is spurred. And I think there's misidentifications that escalate tensions, particularly what we saw over New Jersey last year, where we saw, up to car-sized UAPs, also car-sized drones being identified in the skies, recorded and videoed. And we don't know whose they are. Was there UAP amidst the drone incursions? And then you had drones watching drones, people flying their stuff up, trying to get to see what's going where, and more than likely escalated the number that were being seen in the sky. The EU Parliament pushed for the development of a UAP registry. In Germany, in early 2024, Blinken reported 536 drone incidents. The Rhineland, Palatine logged 100, I think it was. Bavaria logged dozens of police reports for 2024. They were all designated as being drones. There was the Ramstein Brunbüttel LNG site, liquid natural gas. They logged a drone cluster that was over their location of, 30 drones, I think it was. And they says, hey, no, they're all drones. They're not UAP. The German's territorial command actually logged more than 700 illegal flights over 2024-2025 of basically drone incursions that are they hobbyists not following the rules. I mean, I am a commercial drone pilot, and I make sure that I'm following the right decisions, and I'm making the right choices, because I could cause an incident in the sky. I don't want to bring a plane down. I've got to make sure that I'm being a responsible drone pilot under the CAA laws. But of course, many people have bought a drone and are just flying them out willy-nilly, not understanding the laws and legislation that goes with it. I think that's also pushed up that UAP flap number. So mis-IDs, drones, balloons. I think there's a stifling of reports by saying that they're all drones as well. It might be it's a convenient rug to push everything under. Maybe we are seeing bizarre stuff and we're going, let's just say it's a drone. Let's just say it's a balloon. I think that's always been the case. So how can you help? I think there is a move in disclosure now, a research, and your role, I think, plays into this. So this is a bit of a call to action, really, as to end our presentation today. We should support NASA's UAP study ongoing into 2026. There are citizen science via apps like Enigma, the UAPreporting.com operated by the Debrief that connects to the Centre for UAP Studies database. I spoke to Nick Pope via X a couple of weeks ago, who had recently announced the UAP Alliance. To my understanding, there is a multi-report gathering platform for military and civilian personnel. There's an energised move in independent science too, like you see from Skinwalker Ranch scientists who clearly are involved and invested in these topics. I think there is a new level of openness to discuss these topics. And I think there might be a huge overlap in the effort as well. I think ASSAP's contribution is interesting because over the course of 45 years of ASSAP's history, there has been UAP reports come to us. Now, sitting on this side of ASSAP, I know and I understand that our technology that we have in place is not necessarily the right place to report it. But I understand from a technological point of view, we are an important link in the chain for reports to occur. I think we should also be a filter, a direction, a signpost. If reports come into us, we need to know they're going into a database that is officially recognising that these things are occurring. We don't necessarily have to be the end point of that to say, look, we look at how many points of reference we have. These are our reports. Let's not share them. I think these reports should be shared. They should be added to a database that can be analysed by professionals, enthusiasts, and researchers, and so on. And I just think that we need to advocate ourselves to be a link in the chain of where that happens. Personally, I would like to push them towards UFO Identified. I'd like to push them towards UAPreporting.com. I'd like to push them towards the Centre for UAP Studies to make sure that these are getting catalogued correctly. If they come to us, we will push them out to those locations to have those reports added to publicly accessible databases. So I will happily encourage local sightings to occur. I do think there's a challenge right now how if you see something weird, you see something strange, you might post it on Facebook. You might post it on Instagram. What happens, unfortunately, is that only 10% of your audience, say you have 1,000 friends, for example, only maybe 100 people on your friends list will ever see that post. And as such, posts of weird stuff, against the frequent topics that generate engagement, like politics or what you did the weekend, people's dinner, they generate a lot more click interest. Thank you very much. We want to see more of this. Seeing weird stuff, it gets buried really quickly in the algorithm. Doesn't get seen very much, let alone beyond those 100 people who may, on your friends list, see them. So I think cases have had, due to the influx of social media as being the present place where people post their news, these reports are getting buried. So I think it's really, really incumbent upon organisations to say, hey, we are the beacon for where reports should be posted. If you type on Google or into any of the search engines, hey, where should I post reports? There will be a number of reputable sites. It's okay posting with a local ghost hunting group or a local paranormal group, but it's quite often never going to go beyond that group. Added to the data, that is really important, that it's acknowledged. And so I think if we ever have a UFO report come to our Facebook group or our onto any of our friends list, if we see a post that's a UAP report and we see it on one of our friends' cases or whatever, we should highlight them and push them in a certain direction to make sure those accounts are registered. Like the Paranormal database, for instance. Hey, just go log it there. Make sure there is a location where people are reporting their stuff. I got on a bit of a whine there. I'm sorry. Look, let's round this off with a positive message for the future. Let's seek truth in the skies. Avi Loeb, a guy who's paid himself the face of the 3i Atlas conversation, indeed. But yeah, absolutely, seek truth in the skies. My name is Kristian Lander. You'll find me on X at Kristian Lander, at Define Christian. You'll find my website at christianlander.com. Thank you very much for entertaining my terrible cold that I appear to have at the moment. A bit of a stuffy nose. I appreciate the time you spent with me today. Thank you.
Kristian, thank you very much on behalf of everybody here this evening, and for people watching on Catch Up on YouTube, Spotify and Rumble. It was a really interesting talk as usual, thank you. Your expertise and knowledge shines when you give a talk and a lecture, so thank you again. Just touching on a few of the things that you've discussed this evening. These multi